Do you sometimes feel like the hardest part of leadership is not the strategy, but the conversations that actually come with your role, the ones that no one else wants to have? You have to exert the right amount of pressure to be assertive. Too much or too little might just work against you. You have to use the right tone so that you're not perceived as too emotional or too tough. You consciously have to find that middle ground between firmness and empathy. You have to use truth with tact and stay professional all through. In this video, I'm breaking down how to navigate difficult conversations as a leader, and I'll be using a simple but powerful 7-letter framework, the acronym B.A.L.A.N.C.E, to help you navigate these conversations with ease. Each letter represents a key mindset or skill. Hi, welcome back to my channel. And if we are meeting for the very first time, my name is Nancy. I'm a workplace leadership trainer. I've also authored books on leadership, my most recent work being Lead Outwardly Loud. And you'll mostly find me on this platform sharing insights on leadership, professional growth, career advancement as you endeavor to protect your mental and emotional well-being. So if this kind of content speaks to you, kindly consider subscribing. Press that notifications bell on your screen and you're going to get an alert whenever I release a new video. It's so cool to have you as part of this community. If you've ever felt your stomach twist before having a tough conversation with a colleague, with your heart racing, your palms sweating, like you're literally walking a tightrope between having to be nice and doing the right thing. And you're probably dealing with this team member who keeps missing deadlines, or that one colleague who's normalized talking over you in meetings. This video is your personal reminder that your strength in leadership is not necessarily measured by how loud your voice is, but how well you use it when the stakes are high. Leadership is going to call on you to carry the weight of saying the hard things. You'll have to hold someone accountable or even challenge what no one else will, but in a manner that doesn't cost you your credibility or peace of mind. So if you're ready, we are going to start with the letter B, which stands for breathe before you speak. There's a lot to be said about pausing to give your mind space to process and your emotions a chance to settle before you respond, especially in emotionally supercharged situations. And it sounds so simple until you find yourself in a meeting and someone says something that just rubs you the wrong way. Maybe they contradict your decisions out loud in a way that seems to, it feels too familiar, like, I believe there's a better way to handle A, B, C, I'd rather we reconsider this decision. Or a colleague casually interrupts you, trying to re-explain something you just presented, like it would sound better coming from them, and your jaw tightens, and in your mind, you're literally calling on your ancestors to hold you in place because you're about to say something that you may not be able to take back. Your heart rate is spiking and you can even feel the hot air coming out of your mouth. In moments of stress, our nervous system literally reacts before higher reasoning kicks in. So not taking that pause to breathe is going to leave room for your body to take over in fight, flight, or freeze mode. So you find yourself snapping back out of frustration, over-explaining yourself to gain some respect from peers, or you just go silent, shutting down altogether. This is you checking into survival mode. And then you even notice that your anxiety levels are skyrocketing on Sunday evenings because come Monday, you know that you'll be facing the same colleagues again. Learning to take that deliberate pause is going to do one of two things. One, it's going to shift your energy from reacting to responding. Just try this the next time someone rudely interrupts you in a meeting. Keep talking, but at a slower rate as you take one long breath through your nose. Exhale slowly through your response. Like, James, thank you. I'd like to finish my point on this topic and then I'll gladly listen to your take. Simply, I know what you're doing. I'm calling you out because respect should be mutual. And here you're grounded and in control of the meeting. Secondly, you'll have shown that you don't have to respond instantly to prove your strength. And that breath is your power. So the next time before walking into one of those tough meetings or even mid-meeting, just pause for 10 seconds. Take a slow breath in, like for 4 counts, and then hold. And then exhale for 6. Do it twice just to center yourself, and you'll be surprised how that pause is going to change the tone of the entire conversation. The A stands for acknowledge emotions. That is yours and theirs. ignoring emotions doesn't make them go away. It makes them louder. And there's that emotional undercurrent in every difficult conversation. Maybe someone in your team feels frustrated from feeling unheard or overlooked at work. And their efforts keep being dismissed and they feel a bit powerless, or resentment has built up over time from chronic overgiving without reciprocity or even being acknowledged. And here is a team player who keeps saying yes. They keep showing up, they keep filling the gaps, but no one seems to notice or even say thank you. And eventually bitterness takes root. It could also be that you as the leader are afraid of being judged harshly for failing in your role. So you have this internalized pressure to be perfect and prove your worth in that department, in that organization. Still, it could also be a case of pure emotional exhaustion, trying to please everybody, masking stress to appear together. And when we pretend we are fine, when we smile through tension or even push our feelings down because we don't want to seem emotional or unprofessional, we internalize that stress. So the emotions that just simmer under the surface, and the longer they stay unspoken, the more likely they are to show up sideways through your tone, your facial expressions, or even through that silence that feels heavy in the room. Let's say you find out that a big decision that actually affects your team or project was made but without your input. You are not invited to the meeting, you weren't copied in the mail, and when you ask about it, someone casually says, we figured out you are too busy. End of story. Of course, on the surface, you're going to nod politely, but inside you're seething, There's that sting. It feels dismissive, maybe even strategic, and you're tempted to say something, but you don't want to seem insecure or needy, so you keep it to yourself. But then doubt sets in. Then you start creating that safe distance, both mentally and physically, with your leadership team, because you don't know who's in or not in your corner. And these moments are not always about what was said, but what was felt. These are the emotions that actually get harder to manage if left to take root. And that's why it's important to make space for what you feel and what others might be feeling to diffuse the tension before it explodes. Emotional suppression might actually help you survive the moment, but emotional honesty is what is going to help you lead through it. So the best place to start is to recognize the emotion you feel as a signal and not a flaw. Ask yourself, what am I really feeling underneath this? What need of mine is being ignored or stepped on? What boundary have I crossed or allowed to be crossed? And if you can name it, you have higher chances of fixing it. A better approach to the example we just looked into would be to address an email or have a one-on-one with the responsible parties, acknowledging the emotional impact without pointing fingers, more like, I noticed I wasn't looked in on this particular project, and I must admit it was unexpected, especially given how closely I've been involved with the team's progress. I just want to understand how the decision was made and how I can stay aligned moving forward. And with those few words, you've actually opened the door for conversation instead of building a wall of resentment. The L stands for listen to understand. People open up when they feel heard and not judged. When it comes to those uncomfortable conversations, the tone and intention behind your listening is going to shape the entire outcome. So you want the other person to feel like you're a safe space to open up to. And when people feel misunderstood, dismissed, judged, they will shut down. They will retreat emotionally, even if they're still smiling and nodding on the outside. And this is where how and why you listen become crucial. Are you listening to understand? Are you listening to respond? To prove a point or to get a quick fix to whatever the problem may be? Because when you're listening to understand, you're going to find yourself engaging with your entire presence, your posture, your body language, your emotional availability. You literally bring all your senses to the conversation. And you're going to find that it's easy to maintain steady eye contact without staring or scanning the room because you're not distracted. And you'll be giving these small nods here and there, occasional prompts like, I see what you're saying, that makes sense. And as you encourage the conversation, no interruptions, no checking your phone, no fidgeting. In other words, you're telling the other person that what they're saying matters and they have your full attention. So you enter the conversation with more curiosity over the need to control the outcome. And you're saying, I'm present. I want to know what you're trying to say, even if I don't agree with you. If you're listening to respond, you'll find that while the other person is speaking, you'll be in your head mentally crafting a comeback, a defense, something like, well, she's saying I didn't support her in that project. Wait until she finishes that statement and actually say what happened. But the problem here is that the person speaking is going to be of the notion that their words are being filtered through your ego, leaving no room for empathy. And this is what increases defensiveness for both sides. So when you listen to prove a point or even to win, you're already playing judge, whether you know it or not. So you're going to listen just long enough to identify a weakness or contradiction in your argument. And now the conversation becomes a competition instead of a collaboration. She said she didn't really have time, but I saw her chatting at lunch. It's more of, I already know where you're wrong. I'm just waiting to clue you in once you stop talking. These are the environments where it's very, very easy to confuse leadership with dominance. Still, you could be listening to put in a quick fix so that you can actually get on with your business of the day. So you listen just enough to diagnose, then you jump straight into the problem solving, skipping the emotional processing part. Like, okay, here's what you need to do. And the only problem here is that it feels dismissive. The person may be actually in need of a listening ear before all else. So when we rush to fix, we can easily skip the healing and understanding part. And that's the part where trust is built. The takeaway here is to personalize active listening so that your teams and peers actually feel heard and not judged. And you'll notice that the defenses are going to go down. Honesty is going to go up, and uncomfortable truths are going to become easier to manage because now you're facing the problem together and not looking for the guilty party. The A stands for ask open questions. Open questions invite dialogue, not defensiveness. Questions that start with what, how, tell me about, sometimes why, though you might want to be cautious with this one because why can feel defensive if your tone is not warm. And these are all open questions. They cannot be answered by a simple yes or no. They're like emotional keys, they unlock what people really need to say. So they show that you're not there to interrogate or trap anyone. On the contrary, you're actually there to connect with them. And they're going to come in handy mostly during moments when you're about to give unfavorable feedback and you expect some amount of friction. Say, here's someone in your team who's been a little absent-minded lately. So they seem preoccupied with something deeper and it's beginning to reflect in their work. Talk of skipping deadlines, missing crucial details, coming to work late or even skipping work altogether without prior explanations. And you could easily opt for closed questions, which clearly invite short, limited yes/no answers, just to shut down the conversation with not as much insight. And they usually start with, do, is, have, can, are, like, is everything okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Is something wrong? No, I'm good. Is this going to be a problem? No, not really. So they're more focused on protecting themselves, not collaborating with you. And you see that these questions can actually come off as confrontational or controlling, even if you don't mean for them to. Are you the one who submitted the report yesterday? And all of a sudden, someone feels attacked. They feel like they have to defend themselves if they want to keep their job. Open-ended questions, on the other hand, feel less threatening. Supposing you tried, instead of, is everything okay? If you said something like, what's been weighing on you lately? And for your colleague who's been missing the crucial details, or for your team player struggling with the deadlines, you say something like, what came up that made it hard to meet this deadline? Or what do you need moving forward? Or even for the one who keeps coming late, if you, instead of hi late comer, try, what's making it hard for you to arrive on time lately? Here, you're setting the pace for real conversations, and your teams can actually see that you genuinely want to understand and not accuse or reprimand them. And these questions leave ample room for the other party to give thoughtful, detailed answers. And now they pause and look up. Actually look up and start talking to you. I worked in an organization where no disciplinary action could be carried out before giving room for dialogue. And something happens when you know that you'll be given space to plead your case before anyone decides on your feet. That's a fair chance organization, and those are the environments where you're going to experience the most growth professionally. The N stands for name the issue respectfully. Tiptoeing around sensitive conversations breeds confusion and resentment. I call it the hidden cost of avoidance. you know that something is wrong. You know that something is not working. Maybe you have someone in your team who delivers excellent results on their performance, but their attitude is condescending. It's eroding the team morale and even causing tension. Or someone in your team is such an underperformer. Everyone is aware of it, but no one is addressing the situation. So you prefer to drop hints here and there. You want to use vague language, hoping that they're going to catch the drift, or even you want to sugarcoat the message so much so that it even loses meaning, because you don't want drama. You don't want to sound harsh. And in your mind, you're protecting their feelings. So you'd rather postpone the confrontation to a later date, but in the meantime, the issue stays. The behavior continues and the confusion slowly morphs into resentment both ways. Chances are high that the person will not fully understand what the issue is or what needs to change. So they hear you being nice and they assume that everything is basically okay. Worse still, they sense that something is wrong, but you won't come out with it. So they get into that overthinking mode, and that's what is causing confusion right there. Another possibility is that resentment may start building from both sides. On your part, you're wondering, why don't they just get it? Why do I have to be the one to bear the burden of calling them out? And on their part, they become unsettled because they think you're being weird. Something is obviously off within the team, but they're not being told what it is. So this silence that you thought would actually save the relationship actually acts as breeding grounds for unspoken tension. If you're in a leadership position, you want to consciously practice being clear over being nice, being respected over being liked, being direct over accommodating, especially when it comes to truths that eat into the values of the team if they're not addressed. And you don't have to be mean. You don't even have to be overly tough. You just have to be honest and grounded. Say something, to the tune of, I've noticed that the past month that projects and reports are often submitted a few days late. I just want to understand what's going on. Your contribution matters to the team. And here you've named the issue, you've protected clarity, and you've equally preserved the relation. It's very clear, but it's non-accusatory. Truth is going to build trust, but only when it's spoken. You don't need to come with that harsh energy, but it's important to be direct but kind. Stick to the facts, not assumptions. And when people know where they stand, they're going to stop guessing. And when you stop avoiding, you stop carrying conversations that you should have had weeks ago. Just say it with heart, but say it anyway. The C stands for collaborate on a way forward. You're going to notice that people are more committed to solutions that they help create. So you can choose to hand your team members the answer, or you can invite them into the process. In one, people are going to feel left out of the solution. They're going to become less invested in making it work. In the latter, they're going to feel seen. They're going to feel respected, trusted, which actually gives them a sense of ownership as they feel involved. Just imagine walking into a meeting where your boss rolls out a new policy or even a plan on you without asking for your input. So in your mind, you're going back and forth like, is this thing going to work or not? Why weren't we asked? Why weren't we considered like the other times? Who decided on the policy just like that? You're going to do whatever it's required of you as per your role because the boss said so, not because you helped bring the vision to life. Collaboration builds accountability. And when people participate in the policy building, they're going to have a deeper understanding of the why behind it. They're going to see their fingerprints on the process, and they're even going to feel like they have that natural pull to follow through because it's partially theirs. And that's the difference between giving someone a script versus letting them write a few lines of it themselves. For example, someone in your team struggles with handing in weekly reports, and then you decide to put on your manager's hat and say something to the tune of, okay, from now on, I'll be expecting the status report from you every Friday by 3 p.m. It's clear, it's concise, but it's a top-down approach. I say jump, you ask how high. You could alternatively say, I've noticed some updates slipping through the cracks, and I know that we can actually find a system that works for everyone. A more realistic way for us to stay on the same page, and your suggestions are welcome. And now you're inviting their brain into the solution mode, not defense mode. And even if the final outcome is going to be similar, their emotional relationship to it is completely different. When people help shape the plan, they don't just follow it, they own it. The E stands for end with empathy. The closing of a conversation is just as important as its beginning. How you end a difficult conversation can be the difference between someone walking away feeling heard and empowered, or feeling confused and emotionally raw. You want to close on a very thoughtful, clear note that strengthens trust. And in most emotionally charged conversations, people are going to walk away asking themselves, did I mess up? What's the next step from here? Are things going to be awkward moving forward between me and the other person? A strong close is going to give the message that we've dealt with the hard part and we are still in this together. And you'll see in regular meetings, you'll always finish with action points, what we're going to do next. So when it comes to difficult conversations, you want to consciously restate any agreements that you had and thank the other person for engaging in the conversation. Say you've had a tough one-on-one with one of your team members over performance issues. That can be sensitive. So instead of saying, okay, thanks for the chat, and issues remain vague and unresolved, try something along the lines of, okay, thank you for your honesty today. I know this was not an easy conversation to have, but I really value the trust that we are building here. So to recap, we agreed to check in weekly for the next 1 month. And if anything feels off, we are going to talk about it right away. Sounds good? Here, you've actually validated the emotional weight, you've restated the agreement, you've affirmed the relationship, and you've set the tone for the next steps. And this is what creates emotional closure and also dilutes any future awkwardness. Difficult conversations don't have to damage relationships, and done well, they can actually strengthen them. You can see that difficult conversations will always be part of leadership. It comes with a package, especially in the high pressure, ultra competitive environments. Hopefully you can apply this acronym in your next tough conversation and let me know how it goes. I hope you received value from this video, and if you did, I'd love to read what stood out to you the most. Please give it a like and subscribe, if you haven't already joined this community. Check out this video next on tips on how to lead without managing at your workplace. It might just help avoid the difficult conversations altogether, Thank you so much for your company. Thank you so much for being with me in this video, and see you on the next one. Bye.